On July 4, Independence Day in the United States, a group of Navy sailors boarded a cruise ship with their loved ones ready to celebrate the holiday. However, shortly after the cruise ship left the port, a massive explosion occurred, killing over 500 passengers on board. ATF Special Agent Doug Carlin was tasked with investigating the case. During the investigation, Doug found that the source of the explosion was a car parked on the lower deck of an oil tanker. Now, all they needed to do was find the owner of the suspicious vehicle to apprehend the mastermind behind the explosion. After surveying the scene, Doug returned to the office to organize the clues. A colleague informed him that a woman had called earlier asking for his personal information. Doug found this call suspicious and immediately returned it, but no one answered, so he left a voicemail. Shortly after, Doug received a call from the medical examiner's office, informing him of a strange corpse. The deceased's name was Claire, a beautiful young woman with burn marks on her body. Although she appeared to be a victim of the explosion, Claire's body was found before the explosion occurred with traces of tape over her mouth. The police concluded that this was likely a standalone kidnapping and murder case, where the perpetrator burned Claire alive and deliberately disguised her as a victim of the explosion, possibly to cover up the murder. Based on his experience, Doug speculated that the perpetrator of the cruise ship explosion and Claire's murderer were likely the same person. Doug then visited Claire's home for investigation and discovered that she had a brown-red second-hand car for sale. Doug suddenly had a bold guess. The killer likely kidnapped Claire under the guise of buying her car, used it to transport the bomb, and then killed Claire to silence her. Doug continued to search, uncovering more and more strange clues. First, a sentence was pieced together on a refrigerator magnet: "You can save her." It's as if Claire knew she would die, so she left a message for visitors in advance. Second, there's a recording of Doug's own phone call on Claire's home phone. This was his reply to the woman who called earlier, meaning Claire was the woman who called Doug asking for personal information. Third, there are some blood-stained bandages in Claire's home, and upon examination, the blood matches Doug's. Additionally, Doug's fingerprints are all over Claire's house, indicating a close relationship between them. However, Doug is certain that he doesn't know her at all, and they've never had any contact before. Apart from Doug, a mysterious special investigation team is also looking into the case. Doug synchronizes the information he has gathered so far with the leader of the investigation team. The leader highly appreciates Doug's deductions and personal abilities, so he invites Doug to join his investigation team and takes him to a heavily guarded military base. The leader tells Doug that they have access to the latest technology, which allows them to review past events through satellite monitoring systems. However, due to the massive amount of data, they can only start viewing videos from 4 days ago in chronological order, and they can't fast forward or rewind. Doug's task is to help observe and confirm locations to quickly identify the suspects in the bombing case. Doug decides to start by observing the deceased Claire because the video is from 4 days ago, at which point the suspects were likely still preparing, such as contacting Claire to inquire about buying her car, etc. After watching for 2 full days, Claire finally receives a suspicious phone call. The caller carefully asks about Claire's situation and address, then claims they'd like to see the car tomorrow night. Claire replies that she has plans tomorrow night and can only meet the day after. The buyer sounds disappointed upon hearing this and reluctantly cancels the deal before hastily hanging up. This person is very cautious, using a public phone and deliberately avoiding street cameras, indicating that he is likely the suspect in the bombing case. Although the surveillance didn't capture his face, the investigation team quickly tracked the suspect's whereabouts based on his distinctive large backpack. Despite the new progress in the case, Doug is filled with doubts. First, this so-called new technology surveillance system can actually penetrate walls and obstacles, directly observing every move Claire makes at home, down to the smallest detail. Secondly, when they were monitoring Claire, she clearly sensed that someone was spying on her. Doug has a feeling that this isn't just any ordinary surveillance system. To confirm his suspicions, he discreetly shines a beam of infrared laser onto the screen. Astonishingly, Claire in the video directly reacts to the red light, indicating that this isn't a satellite surveillance system. Finally, the team leader admits the truth. What they see on the big screen isn't video footage at all, it's real-time observation. Technicians discovered a wormhole connecting to another time-space, leading to the development of this new surveillance technology, which can directly observe the past 4 days. Doug is stunned by this revelation. After calming down, he realizes that if the laser can penetrate the wormhole and travel back in time, it means that the two timespaces can influence each other. With this bold idea in mind, Doug decides to send a note with information about the suspect to himself 4 days ago, hoping to catch the suspect in advance and prevent the tragic explosion. After much hesitation, the team leader agrees to Doug's proposal. Soon, the note successfully appears on Doug's desk. Unfortunately, they were too late. Doug from 4 days ago had just finished work and gone home, and his colleague happened to see the note. The colleague realizes the severity of the situation upon reading the note. He immediately follows the clues on the note and heads to the dock alone to intercept the suspect, resulting in a confrontation with the suspect. Doug's colleague is fatally shot, and the suspect escapes in a car, dragging the colleague's body into the trunk before leaving the scene. As the gunfight occurred during heavy rain, the scene is quickly washed clean, erasing any evidence. Watching from the sidelines, is shocked by his colleague's death. He had believed the colleague was on vacation out of town and had even tried to contact him after the explosion, urging him to return and investigate. Who now realizes his colleague had been killed by the gunman long ago. The gunman had initially abandoned Claire's car, but due to the shootout, his car was left with bullet holes. To evade security checks and board the cruise ship smoothly, he changes his plan and directly kidnaps Claire, stealing her car in the process. In other words, Doug's act of passing the note indirectly led to the deaths of his colleague and Claire. However, the investigation team finally gets a clear look at the gunman's face. Using facial recognition, they identify him as a notorious terrorist. The police quickly locate his hideout and apprehend him. Although the gunman confesses to his crimes, during Doug's interrogation, he cryptically says, "Any attempt to change fate only accelerates its occurrence." Surprisingly, the gunman has already confessed. The investigation could have ended here, but Doug is not content. He feels guilty for indirectly causing the deaths of his colleague and Claire and is determined to prevent the catastrophic cruise ship explosion. After much persuasion, Doug is granted permission to personally travel back through the wormhole to the time 4 days prior. Though his colleague is already dead by then, Claire is still alive, and the explosion has not occurred. Doug believes he still has a chance to stop the perpetrator's criminal actions and save everyone. With that determination, Doug successfully traverses back in time. With less than 2 hours remaining before the explosion, Doug hurriedly drives to the suspect's house. The suspect is in the process of pouring gasoline on Claire. Doug engages in a fierce struggle with the suspect. During the chaos, the suspect ignites the gasoline, trapping Doug and Claire in a sea of flames. The suspect then drives to the port, ready to carry out his terrorist attack. Doug rescues Claire, sustaining minor injuries himself. As they flee the scene, Doug briefly introduces himself to Claire, explaining that the suspect intends to use her car to transport the bomb to blow up the cruise ship. Claire suggests calling the police, but Doug believes there's no time left. They first stop by Claire's house to rest briefly. Doug, familiar with the layout, finds bandages and disinfectant, and tends to his wounds. He also arranges the refrigerator magnets into a message, "You can save her," as a reminder to his future self. Claire becomes suspicious of his actions, points a gun at Doug, demanding to know if he has been secretly surveilling her, as he seems too familiar with everything in her house. Doug reluctantly reveals the secret of time travel to prove his honesty. To confirm his identity, he provides Claire with his office number and asks her to call and verify his information. Claire calls, and Doug's colleague confirms his identity, finally convincing Claire. After a brief rest at Claire's house, they immediately head to the port. By this time, the suspect has parked the car containing the bomb on the lower deck of the cruise ship. To protect Claire, Doug instructs her to wait on the shore while he boards the ship alone to dismantle the bomb. However, the suspect, who had already left the ship, returns upon spotting Doug. Claire witnesses this scene from the shore and, fearing for Doug's safety, jumps onto the cruise ship at the last moment, only to be quickly discovered and captured by the suspect. The suspect ties Claire inside the car with the bomb. Seeing this, Doug subtly hints to her to find an opportunity to start the car. In order to create an opening for Claire, Doug pretends to surrender and lures the suspect in front of the car. Seizing the chance, Claire presses the gas pedal forcefully, crashing into the suspect and finally subduing him. However, the bomb in the car has already been activated and cannot be dismantled in time. To protect everyone, Doug drives the car with the bomb into the sea and, at the last moment, unties Claire and pushes her out. This time, Claire and the over 500 passengers on the cruise ship are finally saved, but Doug himself doesn't manage to escape and dies in the explosion. Witnessing everything, Claire is overwhelmed with grief. At this moment, a detective arrives at the scene to investigate the explosion, and it's this timeline's Doug. Seeing the familiar face, Claire's sorrow turns to joy, and Doug also feels a sense of déjà vu upon seeing her. It seems that in this timeline, the two of them are about to have a happy ending.